Doll. And good morning, folks, for everybody that's jumping on, and welcome to the Small Business Leadership Edge show. We're excited for today's session simply because I cannot wait to be able to discuss with you some of the core topics that we're dealing with today. It's so relevant in our space, and I'll be introducing our panelists in just a moment. But today, we're all about talking about tackling legal issues and the business challenges that are caused by COVID-19. This is nuts right now because the requirements are changing daily, things that are happening, and basically we're reopening, now we're closing down, whether it's the lockdown being lifted or employees returning back to work, facilities starting to open, or just some of the public access is starting to come back around, including some of the guiding principles that will help reduce your exposure. That's what our conversation is going to be all about today. And I'm really thrilled to have Sejal Thakar on this morning. I just want to say hello. She is our Chief Civility Officer and our attorney, employment attorney. So she is amazing. And can you just say hello to the folks before I do a full introduction? I want to go into a few things, but good morning, Sejal.
Good morning, everyone. How's everything going? Oh my God, thank you so much, Tony, for having me here. I'm excited about today's call, so thank you.
Well, welcome. I'm excited to have you on as well and can't wait. It's going to be powerful getting a chance to, and let me pull you back off here. It's going to be powerful to get a chance to hear, gosh, with all of the shifts and the changes, it's not this day and what we're talking about today as far as legal issues and hoops that people are jumping through to get back into business. This is also about us staying in business and some of the shifts and changes that we're going to have to make for a long period of time, the long term. This is not a quick, fast solution. These things that will be changing, they're not just, they're just changing for a few moments. These changes are going to be made for a long period of time, because even when we do get a vaccine, which think about it, we're still, it's still going to be mid-year 2021 before some of that really starts to release. There may be things that people can do now to help themselves and deal with it, but there's not going to be a cure that's going to be on the market for a time. And even once there is, we're still going to work different. We're still going to look at the way we operate differently. We are still going to be in a different world today and tomorrow than we would be otherwise. So as you think about today, take those notes. Make sure you're prepared to ask a few questions, because this is the moment to talk about specific things that are happening in your small business. I'm about big business solutions for your small business. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to, talk about some of the challenges that are happening in big corporations, because they're happening in our small businesses also. And we are now on a level playing field. Everybody's working from home. People are losing their business, whether it's big business or otherwise. Yes, there are still industries that are moving and shaking. Yes, there are still industries that are skyrocketing. And that's one of the pivots that we all need to make a shift to, which is, how do we do business different? How do we also go after industries and markets now that are going to be the emerging markets, or that are doing well in the midst of this space? And those are things, yes, we need to be thinking about, but we also need to be thinking about how do we survive and continue to thrive on the other side of this pandemic. So as I welcomed Sejal Thakar on, I want to welcome our other co-host. She is, of course, my partner in crime, Amy Cole. She is our executive recruiter and staffing expert in the New York metropolitan area. So Amy, good morning. And actually, Amy, if you could unmute yourself, my dear. We didn't hear a word you just said there. Okay, I unmuted you. Did that work?
Hello from New York City. Thank you for having me, and very nice to meet you, Saha. Nice to meet you.
And it's Sejal Thakar.
Sejal. Nice to meet you.
That's okay. Okay, good. And that's why we say hello, so we can do the mic check real quick here. So, ladies, we are going to have an engaging conversation today, and I want there to be a little bit of a free flow, because usually I'll ask some questions, and which I'll still do, but I think there's some conversation opportunity here that I want to make sure that we get a little bit of a banter back and forth, because as some of the questions are being answered, there's things that are coming up for a lot of people, including our own selves. I mean, there's sometimes where I'm on here and I'm like, okay, I told people I'd be asking these questions, but this is as a result of what you just said, this is what I want to know right now. So I want to stay on the pulse of allowing us to, have that dialogue, but really being able to hit home to the questions that we're really facing and dealing with every single day. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into today's topic, and I'm going to introduce Sejal and give you a little bit about her background first and foremost. For those of you that are in the space of, I know I need to find an attorney, or at least get the legal advice that says, these are the things that I need to be doing. This is what I need to look at to protect myself, to protect my business, and to protect my people. I am putting the disclaimer out right now. Small Business Leadership Edge is not a legal entity, and we do not give you any legal advice. And anything that is said here, please go and research and hire your own attorney and all those other things, because we're not trying to be liable, but we're trying to help inform you to the level we can and give you some resources that can be leveraged. So I just want to put that disclaimer out, but we do have an amazing, brilliant attorney on. She is the Chief Civility Officer as well as an employment attorney. And what I love about the style of Sejal is that she calls herself, and everyone else calls her, the legal training ninja, because she is on point. You want to talk about someone that can break the legal issues down in a way that we can, in those bite-sized pieces that we can consume. She's brilliant. She's graduated cum laude from Northern Illinois College of Law. And I like the background, Sejal, of you being able to look at employment law issues, the discrimination, the harassment issues and challenges, as well as just workplace investigations, things that make a difference that translate into a business going under as a result of one lawsuit. So she's the one that keeps you out of trouble, or gives you some of the guidelines to be able to be thinking and thought-provoking about how we operate. And so I want to just have you right now with the space of the legal impact, things that are going on from we're going back to work. What are your thoughts, Sejal? What are you seeing? And just as an overview, talk to us the real-time stuff. What's going on, and how are you advising your clients to protect themselves at this time?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction. Wow. I mean, I'm honored and humbled to be here. You're so amazing. And so, one of the issues that I'm really trying to talk to my clients about, and I think that's very important, because I started thinking about really, what do I want to share with your audience here today? And knowing that a lot of them are going to be small business owners, I really wanted to kind of talk about some issues that are relevant to small business owners, because let's think about it. We're hearing about organizations they're huge, they have the resources, they have their own legal departments, they have their own in-house HR folks that are helping them, and even they are struggling with everything that's going on, right? So for the small business owners, I think that, look, I mean, I was saying this before all this happened, but I'm going to reiterate, you need to be more proactive now than ever. You cannot wait. One complaint, like Tony said, is too late. And so when you don't have those resources available, like the bigger organizations, you really have to take it on and own it, and really be in touch with not only, use sort of like a multidisciplinary, I like to call it, approach. So have your lawyer that you're going to consult with, because obviously the laws are changing. And so you have to make sure you're doing the legal compliance piece. But let's be very clear, that's not the only piece that needs to be considered, right? Because we're dealing with a pandemic. So you need to have public health officials that you're talking to, medical experts that you can go to, HR, that's going to be there and available to employees. So you really have to kind of look at it, and there is no one size fits all. And so I really think that, when one of the areas that obviously you have to keep it, make sure that you're doing what the law is requiring to protect the safety and health of your employees. But I think that what I saw, at least with some of the clients I was dealing with, Tony, was that they were rushing to kind of accommodate employees on issues related to COVID, or they were creating these new policies for remote work arrangements without really thinking about the discrimination that can happen if you're not really paying attention to the drafting of the policy or your process, right? So for example, one of my clients called me up, and and by the way, Dr. Google is great for a lot of things, right? It's a good starting point, but it's not the end all, right? I mean, I call it Dr. Google jokingly because this HR person had found a policy, a remote work policy online on Dr. Google, and done a cut and paste job and said, okay, this is what I want to, what do you think about this? And I go, first of all, I knew it was a cut and paste job, right? Because I'm like, nobody, no HR professional, no lawyer is going to write that for you right now. So I know, and if they did, you got to fire them, right? Because that is not in compliance with the laws, but also you got to look at your workplace, right? And consider the impact that that policy might have on your staff. So I think that the discrimination risk in and of itself has to be looked at. For example, if you've got a workforce that has a lot of disabled individuals, you need to draft your policies with those employees in mind, right? Because otherwise it might have some kind of impact, disparate impact on that population. So the first thing I want to say is really be careful about looking online and finding policies. I think right now you really need to make sure you're consulting with the proper individuals when you're drafting those policies. And then also remember to not only consider the intent of the policy, but the impact of the policy as well, because that can result in some kind of, inadvertent discrimination, right? So
no, I think that's great. And actually to your point in regards to people looking at the scope of the impact of the policy, we're seeing that in a lot of spaces, from schools to other industries as well, simply because what's happening is you'll see people, like you said, maybe with disabilities or people in underserved areas where maybe they don't have the computers at home, they don't have the internet connection, or they need certain setups to be able to, operate in that environment. I remember someone coming on the show and mentioning, or maybe somebody else's show that I was on, it was just a shocker, that their child was actually dealing with their lessons on the mom's mobile phone until the school system said, we have to make sure, oh, we forgot that everybody doesn't have a computer at home. There's these assumptions that people have in their mindset that they're really not taking into account all of the needs. And hey, even if you don't know everything, that's okay. We're not saying don't know everything, but you're right. Dr. Google is not the only end all. The second thing would be is even asking your people in a group or in an anonymous response, hey, we're doing this. We know it's difficult. What do you need, or what are the gaps that are missing? Because we don't know everything, but we want to take care of you. So coming from that empathetic and that compassionate stance, but admitting and acknowledging we're not perfect. This is new for us too, dealing with our employees being virtual because we're accustomed to everyone coming in the office. Now all of a sudden it becomes, okay, really being able to make sure you're not discriminating by asking, but by also being thought-provoking about doing the right research and asking, like you said, Sejal, the right experts. So I definitely appreciate those comments, because that is so paramount to our success right now, and those thoughts there. So, and
exactly.
Amy, you can chime in at any time, but go ahead, Sejal. I just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just add on to what you just said. And, the way that I've been counseling my clients, and again, this is just my approach. I'm not saying it's the only approach. It's one that I'm taking. So again, back to that disclaimer, but, my approach when I'm counseling employee, like when I have somebody call me up from a company, but I don't care what size they are, right? Whether they're a huge corporation or a small corporation, my advice is the same. And they tell me that I have an employee that came up to me and they want an accommodation. They're scared to come to work because they're afraid they might get COVID. They have fear because they, have kids that are at home, and now they have anxiety because the kids are not going back to school. And so now they're asking for an accommodation. They have somebody at home that's sick that they need to take care of. So basically, anytime an employee comes to that HR person or that organization and says, I need some accommodation, whether it deals with COVID, whether it deals with the current civil rights movement, whether it deals with a prior disability that they've had and now it's acting up because of everything that's going on. So you can fill in the blank for the reason, right? Whatever reason you'd like. If they come to you for blank reason, right? Here's my advice. And my advice is, okay, laws aside, let's start here. Is it a reasonable request? right? Is it a reasonable request? So I advise them to do the same approach as if somebody with a disability was coming to them asking for an accommodation, right? So, and so let me just refresh everybody's recollection. So if somebody comes to you and has a disability and they say they need an accommodation, by law, an employer has to engage in a reasonable, interactive, good faith process to determine whether that accommodation is reasonable. If it is, then there's another part to the inquiry, which is, okay, now we have a reasonable accommodation, but is this going to create an undue burden on my organization?
Mhm.
So it's a two-part test. So I am utilizing that same exact test with, now you have an employee that comes to you for a blank reason. My first question is it a reasonable request? Don't worry about what the law says. Again, put the law aside. Let's start here.
Yeah.
Is it a reasonable request? And if they say yes, then my second question is this going to create an undue burden? Undue, keyword, undue burden on your organization. If the answer is yes, we have a reasonable request and it's not going to create an undue burden, my response is always give them the accommodation now. Do it, because that is the only, your employees need you to show up for them right now. And everybody is going through something different, and you have to engage in the same inquiry for each employee. You cannot make blanket rules because everybody is going through something different. And yes, we're all going through the same pandemic. And yes, we're human beings, but what we are uniquely going through in our own homes, in our own lives is different. And you have to go through that inquiry and make your decision on each factual situation differently. And so again, that's just the way that I'm advising my clients. That's not what the law says, right? But I don't think legal compliance is going to work right now. I don't think it's the right approach.
I am going to jump in because it's very interesting and I greatly appreciate your perspective. I am working currently with a company that has multiple locations, also Europe and Asia. And they are addressing these because California opened up. They started to bring back people that felt comfortable coming back to the office, to your point, Sejal. And guess what? Then some didn't. And it created now they're all shut down again. And so to your point, and employment lawyers are my best friend. Very nice to meet you. I hope that we can marry our minds in New York City, because that's the hub of my staffing. But my companies in Manhattan, as you can imagine, are global organizations always. So what's happening for him in particular is that they have got to, and they're short-staffed in HR because they've let most of their people go in HR. So they are depending on a consultant who's an employment lawyer, much like yourself, to tell him for his New Jersey warehouse is different than New York City office. He has employees coming from 5 different states that commute to New York. One's from Philadelphia. It's different in Philadelphia. So he was giving me this information and I was taking it on in. And so much to your point, you really cannot make a blanket statement. Nobody can. Small business, large business, they're all in that predicament, and they're particularly stressed and need you more right now, and your level of education and you're knowing the laws, because they cannot handle that either right now.
Yeah, it's hard I'm an employment lawyer and it's hard for me to keep up with all the changes, for real. Yeah. I mean, you literally have to, if I were going to be a specialist in this area right now, I'd have to dedicate my full-time efforts on it, because there's so much going on. And then don't forget, there's federal stuff that's going on, there's state stuff that's going on, there's local, but county by county things that are going on. And the requirements are different from one county to the other, one state to the other. Federal is conflicting with state. So there's so much going on. And not to mention that, I mean, think about it. There were so many small businesses, right? They were not ready for remote work. So I'm saying, put the medical stuff aside. But if you focus on this other thing, where now you've got a lockdown. That means the only way you survive is if you can accommodate remote work. And so lots of companies, and I've talked to a lot of companies that have said, we can't have employees working from home. We need them here. But too bad. Now you have to, right? You don't have a choice in the matter. And so, but they're not ready for it. So they're quickly reacting, like a lot of us are reacting. We're pivoting. We're doing our best. I'm not saying that they're not trying their best, but I think that there is no quick solution. And I can't stress this enough. Middle management is crucial
Yeah.
to this conversation. You can't have leaders sitting in rooms making decisions and then not communicating that to middle management, because employees are gonna go to their middle managers when they're dealing with something at home, or they need an accommodation, or they need a computer, or they need a chair to sit on, or a standing desk because of a disability. They're gonna go to their manager, and the manager needs to be trained on these issues, which we've never dealt with before.
Right. And that actually speaks to just they are the person that is really touching the feet on the street. And I know that that's a sales perspective, but really they're the first line that's touching the employees. And they're the first line that's like, okay, we're not equipped with this. We're accustomed to, maybe you don't want to call it micromanagement, but they're accustomed to having people in their space on a daily basis where they feel like there is a bit more of the boundaries that they can put around the interaction and the connection between their employees, because they're there physically. And you and I both know that physical communication, that physical interaction when we're in the same room is very different than even over Zoom. And so now how do we recreate those environments for a manager that's never managed virtually, like you said, but also even in the reopening space of looking at, like Amy, just talking about a company that has people in different states that have different requirements, rules, and regulations. And how do you now say, yes, but this is our blanket corporation. We understand what your law, what is requirement perhaps in your state, but this is what we also require in regards to our business. And there's that fine line of the accommodation versus what's legal and from the safety standpoint versus a person that's afraid to come back into the office versus people who are milking it and just don't want to come back into the office, for a business that is saying, or an executive or first line managers that are saying, not only are we reopen, but we have accommodated or complied by the appropriate safety rules from a federal and a state standpoint of how they've, corrected the issues in regards to their office, how they've corrected or prepared issues in regards to flexible workspace, different schedules, all those things, because there are definitely a couple of executives I've connected with that have said, look, we need to talk to our attorneys because we need these people to come back in whether they like it or not. And we have done the appropriate steps to ensure a safe workspace, including the, masks and the social distancing.
Temperature on the door.
And, everything. So, there's that balance. Are you seeing that? And what is happening in regards to your response to that? And Amy, you too chime in, but what are your thoughts on that, Sejal? Because that's a mixed bag across the nation.
Absolutely. And that's why there is no one answer. You have to look at each situation differently. So after, as I was getting ready for this call, right, I wanted to really give some tips that can actually be something that your viewers can take away with you, right? So I started thinking about what are some of the calls that I've been getting and really sort of how have I been counseling clients. So a lot of, now we have to have people working from home because of the lockdown. So what do I do? Do I stagger shifts? If they ask, for example, if they have their children at home and they're asking me to work different hours, like for example, they're going to split their days. So the husband's going to wake up at this time and then the wife's going to, and so all of these things they were not ready to deal with, right? Then there's the whole paid time off, vacation time off situation. Okay, this person is X amount of vacation time, but they're asking for this time. Can I use vacation time for sick time? And how flexible do I have to be in that? Disability accommodations are a very hot topic right now about, do I have to accommodate? And again, I go through that same sort of analysis, and I always remind employers that, look, all of the discrimination laws, including the Americans with Disabilities Act, they're still in force. So you just follow your same rules. Wow. With those sort of accommodation requests, right? So I always say, make sure that you're very clear. So one of the advice that I've been giving a lot of the people that I've been talking to is my clients is telling them, designate a point person. Mm-hmm. It's anything that relates with disability, disability accommodation requests, have one point person that they're going to send. All the middle managers know who to send it to, and just have that be the point person, because otherwise you have to train all of your middle managers right now. That doesn't excuse you from training your middle managers on what to do if somebody comes over to them with an accommodation request. So that has to be consistently done throughout the organization too. But have a point person that deals with the disability accommodation, and have a separate point person that's going to deal with the COVID related requests, right? Because that's where the laws are changing a lot. So have a designated point person that all your managers, as soon as they hear the word, I have a request for a COVID, related reason, send it to that person, who then is charged with staying on top of the laws, staying on top of the requirements for their particular office or location, and then they handle it the way they do. But I think there are some areas that middle managers need actual scripting for. So I think as an organization, then you decide, whenever you get a request for this, or you deal with this situation, for example, I'm fearful of coming to work because I might get COVID. Like, that is something that we're going to see across the board. I mean, a lot of people are already having that anxiety. So there's some issues like that we can plan ahead for and say, these are the scripts that we want the managers to know, and give them to your managers and train them on that, because that's the person, and time is of the essence, right? So in this case, middle managers need to be able to respond. We don't want middle managers turning everybody to HR, and now HR is having to deal with all these calls. It's going to be impossible. So empowering middle managers with the proper education scripts is another great way to minimize what HR is going to have to take on, right, on their own, because it's too much already with all the other policy revisions and all of that other stuff. So the other thing is also, when if the organization is looking at sort of traveling, if their employees are traveling. So there's so many different issues that are going to come up with regards to, can I require my employees to travel? Can I require them to log on from this time to this time? I mean, there's so many unique situations that are coming up out of this. And then the other one, of course, is performance management. How do I manage these employees now that they're working from home and they're, we're accommodating them, we're setting them up with the virtual office, we're giving them all the tools and the resources, and now they're not performing their job well. So now there's that whole nother piece of virtual performance management, which a lot of employers are not ready to deal with, right? So.
They can't do it well when people are in the office, let alone
True.
Right.
Good point. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I think this really speaks to some of the, first of all, I'm excited that you indicated a couple of the key things, and I want people to hear this and write it down if you haven't done so. Even in a small business, just having the champion for the specific issues versus us trying to know all of it, there's just no way one person can do that. But, being able to say, okay, you're the champion on issues relative to disability, or, the workspace, virtual workspace issues. You're the champion in regards to COVID-19 changes, the safety requirements for us coming in. I mean, I want you to think about just me jumping online to the CDC website as well as our site in the state of California. This is going to be similar across the nation. Each person has different requirements, but right now, if you get a case on site at your office, the first thing you have to do is actually isolate the person, and they have a rule around it. It's 14-7. You have to isolate them 14 days, and then after they're okay or they've tested negative for COVID, they still need to wait another 7 days before coming back into the office space. The second thing they tell you to do is now you have to actually track people. You have to do a close proximity tracking, because the moment an outbreak happens, you find out about it, you have to go back and say, who was the person or who were the people that were around that individual during a 2 or 3 day time frame. It's like 2 days prior to, 2 days prior to, because people are asymptomatic, which means they have no symptoms. And for a certain, till the day that the other person is basically the person that tested positive leaves this facility. Anyone around that person during that time frame, and of course you can say beyond, but in that time frame, you've got to make sure that you do a communication job too, and identify as well as isolate those individuals, because they may have COVID. That may not be a requirement, but then it talks about, isolating them, and then their forms. You've got to do collection forms, dealing with OSHA. You've got to communicate to all the employees that this happened. This is the breakout. Then you report the case, if there's a case, to public health. You actually have to report the case to public health so that the CDC now is getting the communication. after the White House now. Don't make, we're not going to go there. I'm going to breathe and I'm going to be cool. Anyway, so yeah, exactly. So,
Seriously,
but
breathe it out. Breathe it
yeah,
out.
then they're like, okay, once you
Yes,
report that, then
I
you,
know.
if they go to the hospital, you have to report hospitals or deaths to the local OSHA. Then you have to do a disinfectant process, and you have to make sure that there are face coverings and things that are happening right on site.
So
So
much.
it's like a whole, so I want you to hear this. And in fact, if you can put in chat, I do have a couple of sites that I want to make sure I get out to people. Because again, we do have the disclaimer, I'm not giving you everything. I can't do that for each state, but one of the actual sites is www.usa.gov. If you could put that in the chat support, we appreciate that, because this allows you to not only look at updated information on a regular basis, but it also will help you break down by state. And that's powerful. And I believe it may even go to by county. Don't quote me on that, but please take a look. The other site that I think is a good one, obviously, put in cdc.gov, osha.gov. I say these specific ones simply because they are government or they are state reputable sites, whereas you have a lot of knockoff sites that may or may not have the correct information and may not have the updated changes, whereas our government sites are going to have, at least to the best of their knowledge, the updated changes, where you're not getting stuck with post-dated or past information. You're getting the real-time information, or even setting yourself up for the alerts that are coming from those reputable sites. The other one I thought was really good just because it has good information. It is a California site. However, it has we have some of the most stringent laws around COVID. So if you go by the most stringent state, or one of the most stringent states, you're still going to be safer in every other state across the nation. And so please put in the COVID-19 prepared.org. That's COVID-19 prepared.org. These sites are saying, here's what's happening at a high level from COVID. Here's what some of the safety practices or safety and workplace issues are, and these are the things you need to be concerned about. But these are also some of the process steps and some of the things that Sejal was talking about, which is, if you're looking at a policy, what does that look like? If you're looking at disabilities, what are the impact? If you're looking at, and there are a lot of people that are even talking about the mental space of people now having, being at home and not being accustomed to not just getting out. That does go to the performance, but it also goes to how do we actually help our employees even in that space. So with some of that, and Amy, jump in anytime, but I'd like to take it back to Sejal in a moment. Either one of you, what are you seeing in the way now? We've shut down, we've reopened, and we're now contracting again in the way between the layoffs, the furloughs. And maybe we can give a quick definition for our viewers, because some people hear furlough and they think that means laid off, or vice versa. So Sejal, can you give us a couple of quick definitions? And then I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on what's happening in your world.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I talk to employers about layoffs or furloughs, again, I try not to get them to, right, or you're doing a temporary separation. So that's the way I like to look at it, right? So is this something where you are permanently severing your employment relationship with this employee, or is it a temporary separation and you have an intention to bring that employee back when it is financially feasible for you to do so, right? That's where I start the inquiry off at. And then reminding employers that yes, California is an at-will state, meaning you can let somebody go for any reason, with or without notice, right? And so, yes, that is what we are lucky to have that, because that is a really good benefit for employers. But right now, I think is more important to take a look at, from your organization's perspective, what is your intention when you're making that decision? Because deciding, and it shouldn't be the intention to get rid of the bad apples. It shouldn't be your intention to use that as a way to get rid of all of the marginalized populations or of all the old people and hire people and pay them. Those are not valid intentions, okay? But if truly it's because you have financial pressure and have no other option Right. Again, I have to, can I bold that in my sentence? I'm like, no other. Right. Then there may be some requirements by law, depending on whether it's a temporary or permanent restriction, that you have to follow certain notice requirements, certain forms you might have to give to that employee. But before you make that decision, again, really take a good look at your organization to decide, you know, is there something as an organization I can do? Meaning, can I cut salaries? Can we get, you know, I love the idea of this one organization, and I forgot their name, you know, and I was thinking about this last night and it just slipped, but they're based out of Santa Cruz, and I believe the CEO's name is Dan Price, and I'm just forgetting the name of the company. But he wrote down, you know, he had this post on Twitter. I saw this a while ago, and I even wrote back to him and I said, you know what, I'll give you free diversity and inclusion training for your whole organization because of this amazing leadership that you've just demonstrated and I hope everybody follows suit. But basically he said, look, we were in a financial situation and we really didn't want to lay anybody off. We didn't want to furlough anybody. We wanted to do what we can. So we got everybody together and had a conversation about it and actually asked everybody, what should we do as a company to deal with this? Genius, right?
I mean,
Yeah, that is, yeah.
there it is.
Mhm.
Ask your, and everybody voluntarily agreed to take a percentage cut. Senior management, you know, said they were going to delay their salaries or, you know, and they came up with the comprehensive strategy and how to move forward together. That is the best approach, right? I mean, think about that. That makes sense. Ask your employees this before you make these decisions that are going to directly impact them.
Absolutely.
Right, versus what I just saw this morning. I think it was Macy's CEO's leadership. They just put this out, you know, and so they got like a $9 million payment to their senior level management. Meanwhile, they're laying employees off across the nation.
Yeah.
Right? That's not good leadership. That is bad leadership.
And Amy, what are you seeing in that space? Oh, I'm sorry, Sejal, did you have,
no, go ahead. No.
Sejal, I love what you're saying. I believe it was a young company and the guy was a hero. I feel I saw the same thing, whether it was a 60 Minutes quickly or, you know, Harvard Business Review, but also companies are doing really beautiful things like giving the app Calm. Yes. You know, buying the app and requiring that at 2 o'clock we all take a deep breath. I read a lot about these now these are different smaller firms too, you know, in fairness, these are not global IBMs and Federal Expresses, but they are 1,000 employees that they can then, you know, impact their culture by doing that. And what I'm finding a great deal of, in manufacturing, and I have a great deal of retailers that are my clients, they are letting people go. And I am watching quite a hemorrhaging of the labor force right now in manufacturing. Home, beauty, and apparel is something that I've been a specialty of mine for 20 years. So it is disheartening. It's also very disheartening, and I appreciate what you're saying. Macy's actually posted, after letting many people go, 50 jobs on Indeed, only to have my candidates tell me that when they went to apply, the job was gone. You know, this is not what you want to do right now to the mental health of the labor force in this country, as we are watching the rise of homicide and we're watching the rise of suicide. So it is back to a legal issue on how you treat men and women and the integrity that you have as a corporation and your brand. That is your brand DNA, and it's going to get out there very quickly.
And I totally agree, Amy, in regards to that statement. It's not just a brand. It is the things that we are saying, even and especially as small business owners, definitely from a leadership standpoint from these large corporations, things that we are seeing and saying, things that we do in our responses right now. People are going to take note as they look back at how did you respond? What were you saying during this time of crisis? Because how you respond, the culture you create, the impact and the things that you do, small business or otherwise, how you treat your employees, there are going to be so many, there's going to be that resurgence where people are going to make some decisions based upon who you are and what you've done, how you've treated your people. even the decisions that you and I have to make as small business owners, going after different clientele and going after business, who you're doing work with, you know, the brand. I mean, how could you actually just terminate all these people, but then the next day or within even a short window, you've got 50 jobs online. And now you're going to also start to see so much competition with job opportunities that people that are the creme de la creme, they're going to make true concerted decisions in regards to who they want to work with, where they want to go, and what kind of corporation that they want to actually deal with, simply because they will be in demand, but also because they're now making different choices because they see there's a different world here. There's a different way for us to operate. So as a small business owner, we have to start adapting and figuring out, okay, you know what? Not only is there a new way of adapting and connecting, there's a new way we need to create our brands, but there's also a way for us to leverage different online tools, online technology. Are we being commiserate or competitive with other corporations and opportunities by allowing some of these flexible work options? Just because people have COVID and on the other side of the pandemic, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have family issues and dynamics that have changed for a lifetime. People are now recognizing, whoa, we can all do this differently. Number one, but that means we can also do business different. I just spoke with a gentleman down in Southern California this morning. He's been doing solar for the last 15 years. He said, we're now having to sign contracts online. All of our, government contracts, our supplier contracts, and our international supply chain that they're getting their panels or their things that they deal with in shipping, whether it's out of the country or in the country. How they do business with those commercial entities has now changed. Yep. And some of the tariffs that are coming out on a daily basis or not are changing what kind of business we can do and our pricing structure. Because today there's no tariff on you importing these particular goods that we can't get in the US. But tomorrow, there might be a tariff on that, which means I now have to immediately change how I'm pricing and my products and solutions to my end user customers. So they're not just dealing with the workplace issues. They're not just dealing with the regulations around safety. Now the supply chain management has been impacted as to what's going to be taxed, what's not, what can I ship, what can I not ship at this time, what's available. So there's all these loaded issues. And what that does for me is, and that's one of the things that I'm doing right now that I absolutely have, I really enjoy, is getting people online and helping them figure out, how do I transition? How do I pivot? You've heard me talk about pivot to profit secrets. How do I pivot, shift, and jump into an online business? Not an online business, but transition what I'm doing today to be able to get online and be able to deliver no matter who I'm dealing with. And we all used to say that, you used to hear that cute little buzzword, oh, we're going to, think global, but we're going to act local. Yeah, well, you know what? That still is true. It still is true, but let me stretch that. You really need to be thinking global, period. And you need to also be acting global. Yes, you act local because there's local ramifications, but once you jump online, you need to be prepared to operate and think and capture some of the global marketplace, because we no longer can afford to just say, oh, I just want this local business here and that's it. The floral shop in San Francisco that said, look, the traffic, I'm going to lose my shop if I don't start working online and actually shipping to people across the nation. You and I, Pivot to Profit Secrets, is helping a person jump online and say, okay, you know what, this training program for a corporate speaker or a person that trains our legal training ninja that says, okay, you know what, I may not be able to go in and train people live in the groups like I used to. How do I bottle that, systematize it, put it online so that I can still get out to my corporate clients, still get out to individual clients or small businesses that need my services and support. And now I can streamline that and get across the nation. In some cases, depending on your business, the world, because people now can chime in a way they didn't before. So if you could actually put that in chat, tech support, I appreciate you putting in chat, Pivot to Profit Secrets. This particular program we're looking at is for you to be able to systematize, is for you to be able to look at online funnels, is for you to be able to identify ways to do business different. And even if it's not doing everything online, It could be setting up a funnel that says, I sign my contracts online. I have the right tools to do that. I now also have the right tools to be able to connect somebody to my calendar online. I do a virtual connection via Zoom or Skype or whatever that tool is, so that we can either have a phone call or that we can have that face-to-face, because we're no longer going to be able to meet in a face-to-face setting. And even for people that ask, someone asked me to meet them at a park. I'm like, you know what? It's not worth the risk for me to meet you at a park. I'll meet you on Zoom and we can sit in sit in your backyard, or you can take your computer to the park. But
Right.
I want people doing that. I want people being able to recognize, I can pivot and do business different. There are lots of businesses booming right now. You just need to make that shift and go after different and new markets, and recognize the writing on the wall of what we do different, how we operate, and the brand that we set forward is going to make a huge difference in regards to our today and surviving and thriving on the other side. And with that, I do want to send it back to you, Sejal, because as a chief civility officer, there are so many loaded things happening right now. I know you're just like, it's just, not only do we have this pandemic, but oh my gosh, there's challenges that we face from small businesses, being torn down because of riots, people protesting over having to wear a mask, when it's like, look, people, wear the stinking mask for the next year until we get a vaccine. The year is not our lifetime. But if you get COVID, that is for a lifetime. Your lungs, your internals can be impacted. But you still have to breathe, woosah, as I always say, you still have to woosah. So please talk a little bit about some of the challenges you're seeing from a civility standpoint, what recommendations you're making, and the small businesses that are impacted. Hey, the big corporation over here, they can afford to fix all this stuff that happened. But this small corporation that just burned down, even the insurances figure out ways to try to negate. And even by the time the insurance pays and everything gets resurrected, they may have lost their business and lost everything anyway, especially in the situation that we're in. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, the work that you're doing to help businesses go online, I mean, that is, first of all, it's so important right now and necessary right now. So you are going to be busy all the time because there's no choice. We have no choice in that matter. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. And so before COVID, 95%, or I would say 97% of what I was doing was live in-person training and public speaking. That's my whole business. When COVID hit, it entirely disappeared overnight. So I was one of those people that had a choice to make, Tony, about whether am I going to pivot? Do I want to do virtual training? Do I want to create some content online that I can sell? What is it that I want to do? And so I was one of those small businesses that was at that crossroad, really deciding. And so I could have definitely used your help too, because I struggled with it. And I made the decision that I was going to offer my trainings, and I converted everything to virtual, and so that I could do virtual training. And what I learned was exactly everything you said, was that now I can reach a bigger audience. I can talk to people that are in different countries, and I could get my voice heard in a lot of different places that I couldn't do before. And so I can scale what I was doing now with doing that. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing, because I know a lot of people, and I'm definitely going to be sending people your way for help on that issue. So yeah, so I had to pivot. And so, I started my company in 2017. So literally up until March, I was doing everything live. And so I'm slowly coming back to, building up my business again. And it's a different sort of way of doing it. But also, I think it's great that we're talking about this, because of that, there's a lot of different challenges that businesses are facing as well. Mm-hmm. For example, there is a huge increase in incivility that's happening in the workplace, right? So I call myself two things. I call myself the legal training ninja, because I love training and I love educating, as you could probably tell. And then I also, I like to help organizations create cultures of civility where it's dignity and respect for all. But with COVID, and then with our current racial movement that's going on right now, and just with everything, the stress, the anxiety, the fear that everybody's facing, incivility has increased significantly. And it's much easier, let's be honest, it's much easier to say something dismissive or impatient or rude or, on the computer when you're hiding behind a screen than me saying it to you, Tony, directly face.
Even on Zoom. Okay.
That's right. When we're constantly on the computers. So cyberbullying and, messages on Slack or whatever mode of communication. And so what I tell people is, look, if you don't want a jury to see it, don't put it down in writing. And I'm talking about writing, meaning on social media, on emails, on text messages. There's no such thing as private Facebook. There's no such thing as my private LinkedIn Messenger, right? Once you put it down, it can go anywhere. It's permanent evidence, right? So sometimes I joke around about, like, what's the E in email stand for? Evidence.
I was going to say, I don't know that it's everywhere. I don't, Okay.
Right. It's easy to forget, right? When you're shooting off 50 emails back to back, we're multitasking. I've got my phone going over here. I've got my email up here. I've got LinkedIn open. It's really easy to just be short and you might use caps because you're trying to highlight something and the other person sees it. They're like, what, Tony, why is she putting this in cap? So it lays the foundation that if you're not checking in with your employees, and then don't forget the whole feeling of isolation. I think you were talking about that a little bit earlier. When employees are working remotely, they're working on their own. So they're already feeling disconnected from their team. And so organizations really are facing a lot of challenges about how do we accommodate, but how do we keep our productivity up? How do we do team building? How do we create a sense of belonging so that everybody feels like they are a part of a culture, right? And look, whether we like technology or not, I never even used PowerPoint in my live trainings before. I was all storytelling, and now I have to use PowerPoint to be engaging and provide some interaction in my training. So whether we liked it or not, we have to adapt to it, and then all at the same time trying to maintain some kind of work-life balance, because now you're working from home. I don't know about you. Amy, Tony, I don't know, but I feel like the days blend together. I don't have this concept of weekends, and so we're trying to draw these boundaries and dealing with some companies are saying, well, you're working from home, but I still need you to work 8 hours a day. Meanwhile, you're homeschooling. So all of this has increased incivility in the workplace. And that's not even taking account the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which is obviously a huge issue that we're dealing with again. And so waiting around till somebody files a lawsuit is really too late. So I'm out there really talking to organizations about forget legal compliance. Again, you see me keep doing that. Forget legal compliance, focus on creating be proactive, create a culture of civility. Well, I don't care, regardless of your race, your religion, whether you're able or not, but when you walk into the doors, whether you're working from home or at the office, we got to treat each other with dignity and respect. And don't get me wrong, diversity and inclusion are also core values that you have to incorporate to create that culture where people feel like they belong. But because of everything that we're doing, it's increased bias too. So unconscious bias training is a critical component, and it's not just one time, let's have Sejal come in and do a training kind of thing. It's, yes, we need that training, but then it's got to be ongoing. You got to do your surveys, you got to do your evaluations. So really kind of looking at it from a holistic standpoint about what is it that what are the gaps in my organization, and how do I create a strategy that's comprehensive to take into account all the pandemic issues, also the racial civil rights movement issues, fear, anxiety, and the primary goal should be, of course, the main thing is the well-being of your employees, right? Absolutely. So what can you do to maintain the well-being of your employees? That's got to be the critical component.
And Ames, what are you seeing? Amy, what are you seeing? Because in your space, in fashion and in digital and in healthcare, as you are recruiting, as you are dealing with, even though you're in the New York area, you are still, or in Manhattan, you are still dealing with companies that are across the nation, and a lot of their connections and maybe other sites are around the world. What are you seeing from different cultures, different spaces, as far as the civility and the impact?
Well, it's interesting because diversity and inclusion is the #1 topic right now, as we can imagine. And I love the civility piece of your training. it's been an awkward spot for a lot of people, I have to be honest, because what we're really finding is management is white men. And it is just, I can't stand that we can put that stamp on it, but you really could put a pretty good stamp on that across the boards. And so, you know, and that is senior, that is C-suite, that's where we're talking. Unless you're a Pfizer or the Procter and Gamble's or the IBMs that have worked hard to bring women, minority, color, Latino into that C-suite organization, because I'm a member of a Women in the Boardroom organization. This is where I learn this every day. And it's disheartening. There'll be 18 board opportunities, but we'll sit as a group and realize, you know, those 4 companies really aren't looking at women, but let's go ahead and we'll apply.
Yeah. Oh man.
Mhm.
Wow. So it just doesn't matter from the boardroom to the, you know, yes to the C-suite. That's very true. But even just middle managers, you're seeing that as a challenge as well. And I am actually glad that you're mentioning that in regards to the space of, yes, diversity, inclusion, even some of the challenges that Sejal, you know, talked about, but like you're saying, with us being able to look at the challenges in a world that is pre-pandemic, having the problems, now that things are so brought to light. I mean, it does bother me that we've been watching some of these things on social media, this craziness and the incivility happen all this time. How is it just now all of a sudden people have just woken up? You know, this must be a Malcolm Gladwell moment, right? The tipping point. And then it just was. Everybody's home, everybody's thinking and feeling different. So things are impacting us in a different way. I think the things that we do and say do make a difference. And although you're hearing the buzzword of diversity and inclusion, one of the things that I think that is going to be, that I think should be different, is it should be a part of how we're doing business. This should, to me, and I've done this with facilitating companies with like HGST, which is the old Hitachi HGST, Western Digital umbrella, now IBM's underneath that umbrella. But we were doing monthly sessions with our leadership, and the leadership was coming from around the world. And what we were doing was, it was all around global teams. We did performance management, we did core values, we did communication, how to coach and manage performance, how to interview, behavioral interviewing, all those things. But one of the things that we talk about is global teams, because it's not just an issue with race, gender, the protected categories. It's also, now we are a global environment, how we actually connect with each other, how different cultures communicate, right? If you're talking with someone in an Asian country, they're wanting to talk about family and connect with you first before they actually want to go into business. Whereas Americans, it's, just go into business. It's the same thing with, the challenges that we have of people of color and the issues of, do we hire, how do we connect? Because of all those lack of connections and our ability to want to connect with people that are different from us because of lack of education. It is not just in one space. And I understand the plight of diversity and inclusion. They've got to say that. But I'll be looking forward to the place where it's global teams. It is how we team together. But that is a huge part of how we manage and lead a global team, because you can't discount what culture they come from. You can't discount what background, nationality they are. Even when you look at somebody, and I've had people say, what are you? You're, whether you know what I am or not, there's something different about me. And to say that you don't see color is insane, because every time I see someone, I am seeing your color, because I'm wanting to know where you're from so I can know how to relate to you and connect with you and be respect you, your culture, and the value, viva la difference, that you bring to the organization or to the conversation. And Amy, go ahead. You were going to say?
I have one quick comment. Bottom line is, startup companies that are really based in tech, we call them vertical, oh my goodness, my brain. Okay, digital native commerce. You start an idea. Warby Parker started this way. You put the glasses online. It's just a 3D model. The consumer decides they do or don't like it. They then only have to bring up four styles to work. They then do a pop-up. From the pop-up, they start their own store. It's called vertical digital commerce. Instead of going to Nordstrom's, bringing the consumer and getting a Warby Parker, Warby did the work. Okay, because of that, It is global. They are using people to do their programming in the web in the Ukraine, and they are getting the product from Asia, and we are learning to communicate diversity-wise. So my long story to tell you, I do feel we're getting somewhere because we are molding together different countries to work in brands and products that will then go global.
That's
And
good.
they have to understand how to work with each other, and they do know how to work with each other. They
Yes.
learn
Well, we
from
hope they
doing.
know, but they've got to do a better job of being able to learn to respect the different cultures and races, and many of the races, and that impact on working and connecting with each other. Because there's one thing to say, oh, I've got to connect with these folks because it's the business. There's another thing to say, in everyday way, the way we operate, the way we connect on a daily basis with each other, with our people, there's a different layer that they can get away with because they're not seeing those people every day. Whereas in the same workspace, that is, you know, a little bit different. So I just want to thank both of my co-hosts here, Amy Cole, and our guest panelists, our distinguished experts today, Sejal Thakar. If you can put her information inside the chat, and I'd love to, I will definitely make sure that we get your information out as we actually put out the replay to today's session. But this session about the legal and the business challenges that we have as small business owners, as big business, and just dealing with this pandemic. It has been powerful to have you both on talking about issues from completely different spaces. This is one of the ways that we are going to continue to get our message out, continue to be able to promote each other, but also listen to the connections that each of us can make as we build our own communities, knitting ourselves together. So I appreciate you both. It has been a pleasure. And you folks know this is Small Business Leadership Edge. We are on every single Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can visit us online at www.smallbusinessleadershipedge.com. Check out for the replays. Make sure you sign up, come in live so that we can get those questions answered. And I can't wait to connect with you next week. Make it a great day, everybody. Take care.